He'll be coming round the mountain when he comes. He'll be coming round the... Hey! Hey, kids! Welcome back to MP Vinyl, episode 5. And we are now on to the second cabinet, which means I get to stand for this episode as opposed to the last two where I was sitting on the floor. In any case, here's the usual disclaimer that starts off every one. These are just... This whole series is just my new vinyls, the reissues from the last 10 or so years or whatever since I've been rebuying some of my favorites. Just because I don't cover it here doesn't mean I don't have it in my old vinyl collection or my CD collection or my MP3 collection or my 8-track collection. Yes, the MP Museum has a little bit of something by everybody. So just if I'm not talking about it here and now, I'm still a fan. I probably still have it. But in any case, let's get into row number 5, which is M through, that would be, I guess, O. No, this would be, oh, I didn't even know what the hell that was. I had to look at it to know what it was. Okay, we'll get to that at the end. This is M through O, mainly M. And now I'm looking through this, there's a lot of M here. And it's funny because the last episode was a lot of M as well between, Marillion and... So in any case, let's get into it. Or as you would say, let's keep it going. I have to have a pop culture reference in every one. So here we go. We are starting off with one of my favorite Beatle solo albums. I recently just listened to the Tim Heidecker Office Hours, Please Please Let It Be. They went through the solo years, and Tim and Eric, the other Eric, went through all the solo years, talked about all the solo albums. It was a great listen. I loved it. But they spent a lot of time talking about this, and Fred Armisen mentioned it as not only his favorite Beatles solo album, but his favorite album of all time by any band. I'd have to put it up there on my list as well. I love this album. Obviously, before this was the McCartney solo album, the first one with Maybe I'm Amazed and Every Night and Krina Corey, drum solo. I don't have that on new vinyl, but I have the original. But my new vinyl collection starts with Ram. This is just such a quirky, eclectic album. It kind of mixes, Paul's pop sensibilities with, Ram On and things like that. And Dear Boy, the last song on the album, Backseat of My Car, is an absolute classic. So it's got these pop ditties, but then it's got stuff like Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, which is real classic, quirky, psychedelic McCartney, kind of mixing up different things. I love this album. I love the sound of it. I love the diversity of the tracks. Smile Away is like an early hard rock metal song. And I believe it or not, I love Linda's voice on this album. The album is actually credited to Paul and Linda McCartney. And I love this album. I love everything about it. It's probably my favorite Paul solo album and one of my favorite solo albums of all, probably along with George's All Things Must Pass and John's Plastic Ono Band and Imagine. To me, those are the classics. Band on the Run's a classic too. I'm not sure if I have that. Well, we'll soon find out. Also, interesting thing about Ram, I'll get to that in a minute, actually. Next thing I want to quickly show off is the Ram mono version, which came with the deluxe box set and has no artwork whatsoever, but I had to have this for the collection. And talking about the deluxe box sets, I talked about it briefly in the last episode. Paul has put out these amazing deluxe boxes, and he's done such a great job. I have over there the first McCartney, Band on the Run, Ram, Wings Over America, McCartney 2, a few others, Venus and Mars, and he's done a great job reissuing the boxes. I think some of the artists that have done the best with reissues are McCartney. The Zeppelin boxes are great, the Floyd boxes are great, the Metallica boxes are great, the Crimson boxes are great. So there's been a lot of great reissue box sets that I had to buy. And Paul has done a great job with his archives. Now, the next thing is not a Paul album, but this is a cover of Ram. This is the Ram Project by Dave Depper. He recreates the entire Ram album, including the artwork and everything. And it's not the only Ram cover album I have. I also have, not on vinyl, but Tim Christensen from Dizzy Miss Lizzy, and also great solo artist in his own right, also did the entire Ram album and released it as I think it was called Pure McCartney, I think. Tim, if you're out there, I would love that on vinyl if it exists. But yeah, so obviously lots of love for the Ram album, with people covering it and regarding it as in such high regard as I do as well. I do have it on 8-track as well. So yeah, it's one of my favorites. I don't have Band on the Run. I have the original, but I don't have the reissue. So the next in my McCartney reissues is Venus and Mars, which was a favorite of mine when I was a kid. And I saw the Wings Over America tour in 76. I think this was 75. I think by the time Wings of America came out, they were touring off of Wings at the Speed of Sound, I think. But this has a special memory for me because when I saw the Wings Over America tour, he opened with Venus and Mars and Rock Show. And Rock Show was such a great album opener and a great show opener. It remains one of my favorite McCartney solo songs. But yeah, I love the Venus and Mars album. I know it's a bit of a underrated album for a lot of people, but for me, I love it. Rock Show, Venus and Mars. Of course, Letting Go is a great one. I love Listen to What the Man Says. He's got weird stuff in there like Medicine Jar. I think that was Denny Lane. And, You Gave Me the Answer. Magneto and Titanium Man. There's some crazy stuff on here. But for some reason, the Venus and Mars Rock Show won my heart over, and this remains a favorite. And also reminds me, Rock Show always reminded me of Joining a Fan Club by Jellyfish. So in any case, so that's my McCartney, but there's so much great McCartney. I do have to get more vinyl reissues. I have all the box set reissues, which are mainly CDs and DVDs. But yeah, I do need to get the first one. I need to get Band on the Run. I love Tug of War. I thought that was a great comeback album. I've recently rediscovered Flaming Pie. My daughter, Melody, turned me onto it. And also the Tim and Eric Please Please Let It Be podcast also brushed up on it as well. So McCartney is one of my heroes. I've often told the story of when I met him. I posted a whole big story about it on my forum, so there's a link out there you could find. But yeah, meeting him was one of the highlights of my entire life. He was always the one person I dreamt of meeting, and when I finally did, he not only lived up to my expectations, but far exceeded them. He was one of the coolest guys ever. And anyway, there's lots of stories out there. I've told it a million times. Not going to waste any more time here. Let's move on. Now we go from McCartney to maybe something evil. We're getting to Mercyful Fate. This is the incredible, well, you know what, let's do these together. Melissa and Don't Break the Oath. These are two metal classics, early metal, early 80s. It was before the thrash scene was out. So, this was kind of like my first introduction to Danish heavy metal, satanic metal. But when I discovered Mercyful Fate, it blew my mind. I talked about King Diamond on a previous MP Vinyl episode, but this is where it all began. These two albums are such classics and early prototypes for what would become progressive metal, because so many time changes and feel changes and great long songs. I mean, such classics on here. Evil from the first album, Evil is amazing, and Melissa and Satan's Fall is a classic. This album, I think it's my favorite of the two. I love Don't Break the Oath. I love A Dangerous Meeting and Nightmare, Desecration of Souls, Come to the Sabbath. Every one of these are classics. Love these two albums. So there you go. Now, like when I went through the Dream Theater collection, when it comes to some of my bands, I have multiple copies because of the multiple versions. So we're here next is Metal Allegiance, the two albums we did. I have the first album on black, clear, gold, and red vinyl. I have the second one, I think, on beer splattered and orange and black. So yeah, multiple versions of both of these albums on vinyl just to collect all the different colors. Metal Allegiance is something I've been doing for the last several years. It's my kind of venture into the thrash metal world, and of all the projects I have, everything I do is kind of rooted somewhere in prog, one way or another, whether it be stuff like Flying Colors and Transatlantic or Sons of Apollo. Winery Dogs is a little more straight ahead and classic rock, but in any case, Metal Allegiance is where I really get my metal side out. And I've been very fortunate to be involved with this. I'm working with all the guys that I'm friends with from all the thrash bands, everybody from, Pantera to Megadeth to Testament to Slayer to Lamb of God to Mastodon, all those guys, Exodus, Overkill, they're all a part of this. And, they're all friends of mine. And, I've been hanging with them for so many years as a friend, but I was always like the prog guy hanging out with all my metal buddies. So now with Metal Allegiance, I get to do it. Mark Mengy was the one that put the whole thing together originally as an outsider, just as a business guy. It started with myself, Charlie Benante, Frank Bello, and David Ellison doing the Metal Masters shows, and then that grew to add Scott Ian, Kerry King, Phil Anselmo, and then it just kept growing and growing and growing. Eventually, Mark, myself, David Ellison, and Alex Skolnick decided to start writing original music, which was really a lot of fun. We did both of these albums right here, right where I'm standing, and have so many great special guests joining us. So it's really the four of us, the core four, but everybody from John Bush to Bobby Blitz to Phil Anselmo to Chuck Billy to Randy Blythe. I mean, so many great singers and guitar players, Gary Holt and Andreas Kisser and Phil Demmel. So yeah, it's just a who's who project. Mark Asageda, I can't forget him. He's the ringleader of Metal Allegiance. So yeah, this is me and all my metal buddies throwing down, and I'm really proud of both of these albums. All right, so let's move on. After Metal Allegiance, of course, comes a giant chunk of Metallica. So yeah, let's go through this little by little. As I mentioned with McCartney, Metallica has been one of the bands that have been putting out these deluxe boxes, which are so well done. And I gotta hand it to, Lars and James have always been so fan friendly. I've always been very inspired by that. Tried to always model myself after Lars, the way he does that. And of course, they've nailed it with these deluxe boxes. So far, all we have are the first 4 albums. And with these deluxe boxes, in addition to CDs and DVDs, you get great vinyl as well. So let's go through what we have here. Actually, it's the first the first 4 albums is all that's out so far. But yeah, so here's the one that started it all, Kill 'Em All. I remember getting this on vinyl when it came out. CDs didn't exist yet. And a friend of mine got a promo copy because he was a DJ for like a college radio station. And Megaforce sent him this. Look at how young they are. But Megaforce sent him this, and he just didn't get it. And at the point when this came out, the heaviest thing yet was maybe Motorhead, Accept, stuff like that. But this is what really kickstarted the thrash movement. I would say this and Exodus is Bonded by Blood. But my friend, the college DJ, just couldn't grasp it, didn't get it. It was just too noisy for him. And he gave it to me, and I immediately fell in love. And I even remembered covering Seek and Destroy with my high school band Rising Power back in '84. I saw Metallica. Well, I guess we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, this album changed it all, and it to this day remains one of my favorite Metallica albums. I just love, the Four Horsemen, Whiplash. They've been played to death at this point, but they're still classics. So the bonus stuff in the Metallica box is the Jump in the Fire picture disc, and then a live 1984 show, which is kind of strange because that's from the Ride the Lightning tour. So let's get into that for a minute. So Ride the Lightning, this is the first tour I saw them on, but let me backtrack for a minute. I bought this the day it came out, was the same day I got my driver's license. So yeah, I got my driver's license and immediately drove to Slip Disc in Valley Stream, Long Island, because the new Metallica album just came out. And I remember reading the Kerrang review, and the Kerrang review was just glowing about it. And I couldn't wait for a new Metallica album because I had played out Kill 'Em All. So this comes out, and it's like, oh my God, it's like got all the greatest elements of Kill 'Em All, but it's even more tighter, more polished. It was not as polished as they would get. But yeah, I remember hearing Fight Fire with Fire, and it blew my mind. It was like, I couldn't even feel where the downbeat was. Is that an upbeat or is that a downbeat? What the hell's going on? And then, of course, there's so many classics on here. Every one of them, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, Creeping Death, they're all classics. You've heard them a zillion times, but at the time when it came out, it was incredible. And I saw them for the first time on this tour. Here's the Creeping Death picture disc, which had Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg. Am I Evil became one of the greatest classic Metallica songs that wasn't theirs, but they made it their own, and it was the start of them doing so many cool covers. But talking about them live, this is the bonus vinyl from the Ride the Lightning box, and it's them March '85 at the Hollywood Palladium. Now, I saw them for the first time, I believe it was January '85 at L'Amour in Brooklyn, and they did a 2 or 3 night stand. It was Metallica, Wasp, and Armored Saint, and they flip-flopped headliners. So the night I went, Wasp was actually headlining and Metallica opened, and Armored Saint was the first band. It was incredible. I was already such a fan at that point. Couldn't wait to see them live, and they became one of the biggest bands in the world after that. But yeah, seeing them at L'Amour was incredible. And then this came out. This is the one that blew them up. Well, I wouldn't say to superstardom, because the Black Album really later on is what blew them up to superstardom. But this is the one that cemented them as legends, and this kind of catapulted them to the top of the big four. I was already a Megadeth fan and a Slayer fan and an Anthrax fan, but when this came out, it was like, whoa, this is next level shit. And this came out when I was at Berkeley, and I remember turning John Petrucci and John Mayung onto Metallica. They weren't Metallica fans yet. I grew up on Long Island listening to the early Metallica albums, the early Anthrax albums, Overkill, Flotsam and Jetsam, Exodus, SOD. I grew up with all that stuff right before I went to Berkeley. So when I got to Berkeley, John and John really weren't aware of that whole scene. They kind of knew Sabbath and Maiden and Priest, and that was about it. So I remember when this came out, I went to Newbury Comics. I took the T to Newbury Comics to get this once again on vinyl the day it came out. And I remember turning John and John onto it, and then they became Metallica fans from then on. And little did we know, 20, well, I guess it would have been 15, yeah, almost 20 years later, we would perform this album in its entirety with Dream Theater in early 2002, I think it was, doing the whole Master of Puppets album a couple times. But in any case, this is it. This is, I guess, the quintessential Metallica album. Everything on here: Battery, Master of Puppets, Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah, Damage, Orion. I remember listening to Orion the night that Cliff Burton died, and John and Kevin Moore were at my house. We were at Berkeley at that point. We had left Berkeley, and I remember hearing that Cliff had died, and we put on my Master of Puppets vinyl. We listened to Orion, and I remember crying like a baby. Yeah, it was heavy. Rest in peace, Cliff. You were one of a kind. Cliff was one of the greatest bassists of all time. And I say greatest, there is no greatest. One of my favorites. He was just a game changer, and he was such a unique player. And he's like Keith Moon in the respect that he was, if you were going to look at him technically, he was, he could be sloppy, but that didn't matter. It was kind of the same with Lars. It didn't matter. It was about the personality. It was about the attitude and the charisma. And Cliff played bass like a lead instrument. Like nobody was doing that at that time. Maybe Geezer Butler, Geddy Lee, Billy Sheehan. But Cliff was a pioneer like those guys. So yeah, this was Cliff's last album. But this album and his legacy will live forever. And on to the bonus stuff from the box set. Here we have, where is it? This is live in Chicago at the Aragon, 1986. So this would have been with Cliff before he passed away. And once again, Metallica just giving you so much good bonus stuff. They're really so great at that. Then came, I guess, the White Album before their Black Album, the Injustice for All album. So controversial on so many levels because of the lack of bass. It was great to have Jason in the band. I was a Flotsam and Jetsam fan already. I already had the Flotsam and Jetsam demo tape, which had a picture of Jason wearing a Metallica shirt. So when Jason got the Metallica gig, I was already a fan of Jason's and thought it was a great, great fit. Was kind of hoping that he would become a writer with the band because I thought he really could have added to the band. But alas, it was not to be. But Jason's now in the band, and they put this album out, which is probably their most progressive album probably ever. The longest songs, the most time signatures, and tempo changes, and I love this album. I just did a version of Short of Straw, quarantine video, but there's so much great stuff on here. And I love the deep cuts. I love the Frayed Ends of Sanity. Dyer's Eve is probably Lars's most challenging, fastest drumming. Blackened is great. And Justice for All, Eye of the Beholder. And then, of course, this was this was their first music video, and that took them up to the next level. You know, Master Puppets got them up here. They did the Ozzy tour. Then they came out with this album and did their first video, and they were all over MTV, so that brought them to the next level. And then sure enough, I don't have the Black Album yet. I'm waiting for that box set, but that was the one that blew them up. But this was them at their most progressive before they kind of became household names. But they were pretty much getting there at this point. Bonus stuff for the Injustice for All is this picture disc, the one picture disc, and then a live recording from Seattle from '89. And, you know, you've heard all these live recordings a million times, but they're just great to have them on vinyl. So now we skip ahead through the Metallica catalog. I don't have Black Album. I will get the box when it comes out. Not a fan of 90s Metallica, Load and Reload. Just didn't do it for me. They could have been called Rock-Talica for those albums. You know, it just didn't have all the things that I loved about them, the intensity and the uniqueness and the heaviness and the progressiveness. So not a big fan of Load and Reload. And I will say Saint Anger, as crazy as it is in terms of the production, in terms of the weird vocals, I will say I like Saint Anger more than the Load and Reload albums, because at least it was going, you know, you could tell that they were trying to write longer songs, get out of the whole bluesy thing and going back to, like, you know, cutting edge, you know, pushing the envelope. So I really do respect Saint Anger. There was a live version that came out with the original CD, which had them performing the Saint Anger album in the studio with Robert Trujillo on bass, who just joined. Or was it Bob Rock on bass? I can't remember. But in any case, it was a live version of the entire album with a bit more raw or, you know, balanced mix without the weird snare drum and stuff. So I appreciated that. In any case, this was the album that brought me back big time. I love this album. This is my favorite post and Justice for All Metallica album. This album, a lot of people talk about how the mastering is too hot. Maybe so, but the songs are great. The attitude is great. The production is great. You know, other than the mastering issue, it sounds tight and heavy, and I love this album. It's one of my favorite Metallica albums. It's up there towards the top. Big fan of this album. Death Magnetic, in case you can't read. And then this is their latest one. This is Hardwired to Self-Destruct. A little bit more of a continuation of Death Magnetic, although I don't like it as much. It's just a little more generic, or I don't know, a little more, I don't know what would be the word, predictable or mainstream, more so than Death Magnetic. I thought Death Magnetic was the perfect comeback album for Metallica. And this is a great one too. It's got some great moments, just not one of my favorites. So there's your Metallica lesson. Notice no Lulu. But in any case, let's move on now. This next chunk, we have a huge chunk here that is Neal Morse stuff. And like Metal Allegiance or Dream Theater, anything that's mine, I collect all the different versions of. So there's going to be a lot of repeated stuff here. But let's start at the beginning. This is Testimony. This is Neal's first solo album after he left Spock's Beard, and Transatlantic for that matter. It was around 2002 or 3, and I was honored that he asked me to be a part of this album, because he had just left Spock's and Transatlantic, and nobody knew what he was going to do. So when he asked if I would still carry on with him, it was an honor. He's one of my favorite songwriters. Since then, we've gone on to make, 25 plus albums together. But at this point, it was the beginning of our relationship for his solo music. And this album was essentially just me and him. Now, there's a lot of guest musicians throughout the album, but basically it's me on drums on the whole album and Neal singing and playing every instrument on the whole album. Randy wasn't even with us yet. And this is the only one from his solo catalog that I believe is on vinyl. So Neal, get on it. You got One, Question Mark, Sola, Lifeline, Momentum. We need those on vinyl. Neal, get on it. But in any case, this is where his solo career began, and through then we went on to make all the albums I just mentioned. And then came the Neal Morse Band. And for those of you that don't know and don't follow what I do with Neal, this essentially is, me and Neal and Randy, who had done all those albums I just mentioned, but then we were joined for the Momentum tour by Bill Hubauer and Eric Gillette, as well as Adson Sardre, who only did that tour. But, after that tour, the five of us were still standing, myself, Neal, Randy, Bill, and Eric, and we decided to make a band, utilizing all of our writing and arranging and composing together, incorporating all of our vocals, or at least mine and Bill's and Eric's. And Bill and Eric do a lot of lead vocals in the Neal Morse Band. And this was the first Neal Morse Band album. This is the Grand Experiment, and it's pretty much one mini epic with The Call, which I think is a classic. One giant epic with Alive Again, which is 26 minutes, and then three kind of shorter songs: Grand Experiment, Waterfall, and Agenda. This was the start of a great chemistry between the five of us, which will continue through the next two records I'm about to show you. But this also has a great bonus disc on the CD. We did a version of MacArthur Park, a prog remake of MacArthur Park. I always wanted to cover MacArthur Park, and Bill Hubauer came out with this amazing arrangement of it. So that's one of my favorite things from this session. But the Alive Again song is amazing, and The Call is a classic. So this is where the Neal Morse Band began. And then, well, I'm going to talk about these together. We have The Similitude of a Dream. We got different versions here: yellow marble, golden marble, vinyl. That's The Similitude of a Dream. And then this is, I don't know if I would call it a sequel, but this is the continuation, The Great Adventure. This is on black, orange, clear white, gray, white, and marble vinyl. So let's just quickly talk about these two: The Similitude of a Dream and The Great Adventure. I have to go on record, I already have, but I'll go on record here on MP Vinyl. These two really are two of the greatest albums of my entire career, from any band, any period. I could not be prouder of these two. When this came out first, Similitude, I think it came out in, was it 2016 or 17? I can't remember. At that point, I said it's the greatest album that Neal and I had made together, and I believe that. And then this came out, The Great Adventure, another double album, concept album, continuing the same story, and I felt it was just as great. I just didn't go on record saying, oh, it's the greatest thing ever, because then people are like, oh, you say that with every record. But I really truly do think that these two albums together, 4 discs, it's probably, they're both well over an hour and a half each. So, together it's a 3-hour plus story, written, composed, produced, sung by the Neal Morse Band. Five different parts, 5 different personalities, 5 different players. Myself and Bill and Eric get to do a lot of singing on these albums, both lead and background. And just what a band. I mean, Eric Gillette is just so ridiculous on guitar. He can play drums and keyboards equally as incredible, and of course his voice is magnificent. Bill Hubauer is such an asset to the Neal Morse Band, not only with his keyboard contributions, but he plays all these instruments from sax to violin, and his voice is great. He's got this great range. So Neal, Randy, and myself were already a great team, but then adding Bill and Eric took it to the next level, and these two albums are mandatory MP vinyls if you don't know them. So, moving on. We're not out of the Neal Morse woods yet. We still have the latest, and once again, multiple versions. This is black vinyl. Where are the colors? Orange, red, white. This is the new cover to cover, the 3rd volume in a series that myself, Neal, and Randy have done. So it's not Neal Morse solo. It's not the Neal Morse Band. It's another thing entirely. It's Morse Portnoy George, or MPG if you'd like. We've done 3 of these. I cannot wait for the first 2 to come out on vinyl, Inside Out. You promised me that it'll happen. It better. We did put out the anthology of all 3 volumes on CD recently, but this is the only one that's on vinyl so far, which is the latest one. And so much fun with these. I love doing covers, but I love doing covers with Neal, especially. We've done so many between the cover-to-cover albums and the transatlantic bonus discs, and so much stuff through the years. He's a real music fan like I am, and Randy as well. And some of the stuff here that's notable, we do No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed, which is a Yes cover that I always wanted to do, and we are joined by John Davison of Yes on that. Life on Mars, one of my favorite songs ever. It was kind of sacrilegious to even consider covering it, but Neal wanted to, and I think he killed it, did total justice. It Don't Come Easy, special song in my heart because, first of all, you know, it's Ringo and it's a Beatles solo song, but I got to sing it with melody as well, which was always great. So check out that video if you haven't seen it. But so much great stuff on here. One More Red Nightmare from King Crimson is amazing. Let Love Rule by Lenny Kravitz. Just real cool, unique stuff. And this year's Morse Fest next month is going to be a lockdown version. We're going to be doing a virtual concert, but the first night is a cover-to-cover night where we're going to be doing some of these songs and some of the songs on the other ones as well, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, moving on past Neal Morse. Where else could you go from Neal Morse to Motorhead? And this is the only vinyl I have. I have all the original Motorhead vinyl. You know, I have that from the 80s when I bought it back then. The only reissue I have is the classic No Sleep Till Hammersmith classic live album. This was probably the first Motorhead album I heard around 82. I was in a band. My first band was called Intruder, and our bass player, Eric Barbasso, you know, we were in like 9th, 10th grade at the time. But he was this Motorhead fanatic, and he had a jean jacket with Motorhead painted on the back, and Lemmy was his hero. And I remember he played me this album, and just hearing Lemmy's voice for the first time, you know, now we're used to it, but back in 81, 82, 83, you know, you never really heard singing like that before, and playing like that too. You know, I was talking about Cliff Burton with lead bass, but Lemmy was very much a lead bass player as well. But yeah, this is classic, the classic lineup. The three of them, who sadly are all gone now, which is unbelievable. I can't believe Lemmy, Filthy Animal Taylor, and Fast Eddie Clarke are all gone. But you know, this will live forever, and this has all the classics from Ace of Spades, Stay Clean, Iron Horse, Overkill, We're the Road Crew. I mean, if you're not a Motorhead fan, first of all, why? How could you not be a Motorhead fan? But if you're not, and you really could only have one album, this would be the one. Okay, we are entering 3 albums that are huge for me. I love all 3 of these, but let's start by talking about this one. The first Mr. Bungle album came out in 91. This is hands down in my top 10 of all time. I talked earlier in the series about my top 5 of all time, which was Sgt. Pepper, Tommy, The Wall, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Ziggy Stardust. Those are my 5 classics of all time. But then if you go into, I have a top 5 of modern classics, and that would be Radiohead's OK Computer, Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, Jellyfish Spilt Milk, Muse's Absolution, and then this. And not in that order, by the way. The first Mr. Bungle album, absolutely in my top 10 of all time. And this is one of the craziest, most eclectic, scariest, most beautiful, most disturbing albums you'll ever hear. I remember I bought this in 91 when it came out because I was a big Faith No More fan. And then there was this talk of Mike Patton's original band now putting an album out. And I remember going to Slip Disc Records in Valley Stream, buying this. And I guess it was on CD at the time. And going home and listening to it. And it doesn't even kick in for the first 30 seconds. So it's one of those albums where you're turning up the volume, like what's going on? And then when it kicks in, it explodes and scares the shit out of you. This album, I mean, Squeeze Me Macaroni, Slowly Growing Death, Egg, My Ass Is on Fire. Oh my God, so incredible. The Girls of Porn, Love Is a Fist. I know this album inside and out. I could play drums on every one of these songs. I could sing every nuance, every video game sound, every Mike Patton crazy, quirky sound. This is one of my all-time favorites. I can't say more than that. Then they came out, oh, by the way, I saw them on this tour as well. I saw them in 91. If my memory serves me correctly, it might have been Halloween, because I remember they weren't wearing their masks. I think that was like the sort of thing. At this point, they were all wearing masks and everything, kind of like early Slipknot, before Slipknot. And then I remember that show, they weren't wearing masks. It was like a big deal. But I saw the first tour. It was incredible. I saw the second tour as well, which is this one, Disco Volante. I saw this tour at the Limelight in New York City in 95. Now this album, if you thought the first album was extreme, this album just goes off the deep end. And honestly, it's a difficult listen. It's like, you know, picture David Lynch's most difficult film, you know, Inland Empire or something like that. It's like the equivalent of that for music. But I do love some of the stuff. Carrie Stress in the Draw is amazing. And then the Secret Song, this was like on that Dream Theater house music tape throughout the 90s. Secret Song and Carrie Stress in the Jaw. And there's some stuff on here that's really cool, but it's really, really out there. They pushed it as far as it can go. And then they came back around with California in 99, which is probably the most mainstream Bungle album, probably the most in the vein of Faith No More, but it still has some real weirdness. I mean, Ars Morandi, however you say it, is another one that I had on the Dream Theater house music tape for years. But stuff like Sweet Charity and Retro Vertigo, Air Conditioned Nightmare, Pink Cigarette, you know, they're a little more streamlined. They have that kind of Beach Boys punk guitar sound, and it's Bungle. And you know, as you know, they're now back together with Dave Lombardo and Scott Ian. I saw them in Brooklyn a few months ago. It was probably, actually, I think it was the last show I saw before the pandemic shutdown, and it was incredible. It's a whole new version of Bungle, which is rooted in thrash and punk and death metal, and they redid their first demo now in 2020, and that's coming out real soon. But yeah, I mean, one of my favorite bands ever. I can't say enough about Bungle. Now moving on, another band that I just mentioned in my top 10 of all time. Here's Muse, and the only two I have on vinyl are Origin of Symmetry, which was their second album, and this is the big one for me. Absolution, like I just mentioned, is in my top 10 of all times. I remember when I discovered this album, it probably would have been around 2004 or so, I'm not sure. I think John Petrucci turned me onto it. He knew the song Time Is Running Out. He heard it on the radio or something, and then he said, hey, have you heard this band Muse? I picked up this album and was floored. To me, like OK Computer or Jellyfish Spilt Milk, it's like every song is perfect. It's a perfect album from start to finish. I mean, Apocalypse Please, opening with that, is so great. Time Is Running Out, Sing for Absolution, Stockholm Syndrome, I mean, Butterflies and Hurricanes, Hysteria. It's a perfect album from start to finish. Every song, the production, the playing, the composition. I can't say enough about this album. It obviously had a huge influence on myself in Dream Theater those years that followed. You can hear it on, Octavarium with a song like Never Enough, or Systematic Chaos with a song like Prophets of War. I mean, there's an obvious Muse influence going on in that period, and this album was huge. The one that followed is also another great one, Black Holes and Revelations, I think it's called, and I should probably have that in new vinyl as well. And then I kind of fell off a little bit because then I started getting a little too poppy for my taste. But this is when the guitar was still huge, and I love both of these albums, but especially Absolution. All right, coming towards the back here, we got Nine Inch Nails, The Downward Spiral. This is my favorite Nine Inch Nails album. I think this is Trent's sonic masterpiece. I remember when this came out, just the production was huge. I remember Kevin Moore being very into this album when it came out. And I think Kevin started listening to stuff like Nine Inch Nails and more industrial things, and that's when he kind of started to drift away from the progressive metal stuff. But we'll talk about that later. But anyway, this is my favorite Trent and Nine Inch Nails album. I believe Stephen Perkins plays some drums on here, and Tommy Lee might as well. And this album cover was an inspiration for me. When we were doing the cover for 6 Degrees, I kind of wanted it to be a cross between this and OK Computer, so you could kind of see where the inspiration came from. The first N.W.A. album, Straight Outta Compton, a classic. I've talked about some of my hip-hop favorites in some of these other videos. I talked about the Beastie Boys and Tribe Called Quest, but this is also a classic, probably in my top 5 of all hip-hop albums. When this came out, I guess it was 88 or so, you'd never heard gangster rap like that. Public Enemy, and this came out, Public Enemy was East Coast, N.W.A. was West Coast. But hearing Ice Cube and MC Ren and Eazy-E and Dr. Dre, I mean, it's really like an all-star hip-hop band at that time when this came out. But man, everything about this album was groundbreaking for the time, and I still love it to this day. Next one here, is Oceansize, a great band I discovered in the early 2000s and was really into them. It was when I was into like Muse and stuff like that, and I discovered Oceansize, and they put out lots of great stuff. And since then, they broke up. I believe a couple of these guys might be in Muse's touring band now, or is it Muse or Biffy Clyro, one or the other, but I believe a couple of these guys are now teamed up with either Muse or Biffy Clyro. Sorry, I do this on the spot. I don't do the research beforehand, so it's all off the top of the head, and sometimes, you know, memory is full up here. Speaking of new bands, this is one of my favorite albums of this year, one of my favorite albums of 2020. This is Once and Future Band. And this album, Deleted Scenes, is absolutely one of my favorites of the year. It's kind of a cross between proggy stuff like George Duke era Zappa meets Beardfish, meets more jazzy kind of Steely Dan stuff, and great playing, cool songs, great vibes. And I was a big fan of the previous record. It's a funny story. I got turned on to the previous record a few years ago, and nobody had heard of them, and I was kind of just this like little band that nobody had heard of that I was digging. I went and saw Tool live, and all of a sudden the opening band starts playing, and I'm like, wait a second, this is that band, Once a Future Band. You got to be kidding me. I went backstage after the show to hang out with Danny Carey, and sure enough, the guys came into the dressing room, and I was like, guys, I know who you are. I love you guys. They were excited to know that I knew who they were and was a fan, and they haven't let me down with this latest album. It's amazing. Highly recommend it. One of my favorites of 2020. Okay, here we go. We're entering one of my favorite portions of this cabinet, the Opeth portion. And there's so much great stuff here. I can't get into it all album by album. It's so great. I am the biggest Opeth fan. Let's just kind of just show them all here. I am, you know, it's kind of been known. I've talked about Opeth a million times through the years. Took them out with Dream Theater on the Progressive Nation tours of 2008 and 2009. Been such a fan of theirs for, you know, 20 years now. Become great friends of all of them, especially Michael Ackerfeld. He's one of my dearest friends and just a real kindred spirit. I guess I'll quickly go through the catalog, but I don't have... Michael's been promising me all the old vinyl, and of course it never arrived, but he did come through with the box set of the latest one, so I'll let him off the hook for that. So the first vinyl I have is Blackwater Park. I love Still Life that came before this, but to me, this is where they just went to that next level, and it was the first album. Oh wait, I'm not sure if it was the first album with Steven Wilson. Steven Wilson, I'm not sure if he did Still Life, but I first became aware of Opeth with this album. I think because of Steven Wilson's involvement. Around this time, Porcupine Tree was opening for Dream Theater, and I remember hearing about him working with Opeth, and this is the first album I heard, and it's a masterpiece from start to finish. Every song, Bleak, Harvest, Drapery Falls. I mean, the title track. This is a classic from start to finish. And Michael's gonna hate me for saying this, but he told me that Bleak, when he wrote that, he was definitely thinking of Dream Theater's Home. So he told me that Bleak was a bit of a ripoff of Home. So that was, to me, an honor to hear that. But in any case, this is where it all began. And then from here, they went and did Deliverance, and Damnation. I don't have Deliverance here, but I have Damnation. This is the album that blew my mind, because after hearing the death metal stuff and how heavy they were, then they put this album out, and it was like, wow, they got elements of like, you know, Pink Floyd and the Moody Blues and the Mellotrons and the acoustic guitars, and Michael was singing for the whole album without growling. And this, you know, I became a fan for life with this record. And I remember using this whole album as Dream Theater's house music, maybe on the 6 Degrees tour or whatever. Would just let the whole thing play because it was just so awesome. I love the Deliverance album as well, just as classic. And believe it or not, I don't have the next few. I don't have Ghost Reveries, which is, I think, maybe my favorite Opeth album. I don't have it on new vinyl. Once again, waiting for Michael to send it. Or if I can find it, I'll buy it. Believe me, I just haven't found it. But yeah, I love Ghost Reveries. And then came Watershed. This is the album that came out when they were touring with us on Progressive Nation. I love Heir Apparent, the opening song. This is, I mean, Ghost Reveries and Watershed, I think, are the most complete albums in terms of their transition between death metal and like prog or fusion. So I think those are the two albums that best represent the transition. I think this is when Axe came into the band as a drummer, also Frederick on guitar. But I did love Martin Lopez and Peter on the older albums as well. Big fan of that lineup as well. Love both lineups. But in any case, then, you know, the last few albums have been pretty much pure prog and fusion. You know, here's Pale Communion, and here's the latest one, and you know, now they've really become more of a fusion prog band, which I love and respect and admire as well. I know it pisses a lot of the old fans off, but luckily I'm a fan of it all. So I love it all. I think Michael's voice is stronger than ever. He's become such a great singer and great composer, and the band sounds great. So I can't say enough about Opeth. One of my favorite modern bands of all time. It's hard to even pick a favorite album because I love them all so much. But it's one, you know, Opeth is a band for me, like Haken. I've mentioned Haken before, where just the whole catalog is just mandatory. You know, just there's so much great stuff. All right, we're coming towards the end here. Only 3 more bands. Next is Overkill, who I'm an honorary member of. I actually have played a show as their drummer at Halloween of 2005. I was a big fan of theirs from the early thrash days. I used to see them at Lemoore in the mid 80s. In fact, Marlene's band Mean Streak used to open for them all the time. One of the first times I ever saw Marlene play was opening for Overkill. And in any case, I was a big fan for back in those days. And the story is they were doing a Halloween show for Eddie Trunk, Halloween of 2005, and the drummer couldn't get in for whatever reason, I don't remember. So they asked if I would do the gig, and I said, well, I would love to, but I only really know like the first 4 albums, which, by the way, this is what we're talking about. This is a live set that they just put out, and one is doing the entire Field of Fire album from start to finish, which was their first album, and then this is the Horoscope album. But I only really knew the early albums, so the set that I played with them was made up of all the early stuff and covers. We did a bunch of covers because they had the Overkill album. And then since then, Jason Bittner's joined the band, and he's doing a great job with them. And since then, Bobby Blitz and I have done Metal Allegiance and BPMD together. So there's a lot of history between me and Overkill, both as being a fan and then both as, you know, being friends and playing with them. So these are 2 classic albums done in their entirety. And almost at the end here, an Ozzy Osbourne picture disc of Diary of a Madman. It's kind of unfair that I have this and don't have Blizzard of Oz, because to me, they go hand in hand. It's like Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2. It's like, you know, Moving Pictures and Permanent Waves. You got to have them both. So I don't know why I don't have the picture disc of Blizzard of Oz, but I guess I just saw this and couldn't resist it. I love the Diary of a Madman album. I've covered the title track with Sons of Apollo recently with an orchestra and a choir. And all these songs, Flying High Again, Believer, Tonight, Sado. You know, it's got the lesser, like Blizzard of Oz had the classics, you know, Crazy Train, I Don't Know, Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley. But I think this has the deeper cuts, which I really love. I don't know, I love them both. I can't decide between the two, but this is a classic. And losing Randy after only 2 studio albums was one of the biggest travesties ever. I mean, you're talking about Cliff Burton earlier. We only got 3 albums out of Cliff and only 2 out of Randy. It's a shame. Imagine the music they're making up there together right now, right? And last but certainly not least, this was the one that when I was seeing how far the alphabet went, I didn't even recognize what this was. I thought first maybe it was Steven Wilson album, but this is OSI. This was a bonus disc that came with the free album, and I forgot all about this actually. So it's really cool to have this on vinyl. What this, I guess I could quickly talk about the OSI project. It was, I talked earlier about Kevin Moore and 9 Inch Nails and the way he got really into more industrial stuff. He also got really into more singer-songwriter stuff like Tori Amos and stuff. So when he left Dream Theater, he wanted to get away from the prog and the metal stuff and wanted to just do more studio-minded stuff. And basically, I was talking with Jim Matheos about doing something, and we were talking about doing a project together and maybe having Sean Malone from Cynic and Daniel Gildenlow from Pain of Salvation was the one that I was pushing for. It didn't work out with Daniel, but then at one point Jim suggested, well, what about Kevin? And I was like, yeah, it'd be I'd love to see Kevin. I'd love to work with him again. It would be amazing. So I was all into it. And we did 2 albums. We did the first one, Office of Strategic Influence, and then we did the second album, Free, which is the bonus disc that this came from. And both of them are really cool, really, you know, kind of in the vein of where Kevin wanted to go, with a more industrial kind of approach to progressive music. And, you know, there were fun sessions. Just it ultimately became more of a Kevin Moore solo project, which wasn't really kind of my original intentions. So I kind of, you know, passed on the future, on the records that followed. But the first 2 have some really, really cool stuff. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to brush those off or forget about them, because there's some really great stuff on both OSI albums. So check that out. Check them out if you don't know them already. And that brings us to the end of row number 5 and episode number 5. You can see a sneak preview of what's to come next. Next episode will be P through S, but there is M through O. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I hope you learned maybe something you didn't know, maybe heard about some music that you weren't aware of, or some albums you weren't aware of, and you go check them out. So in any case, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and happy listening, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Woohoo! He'll be coming around the mountain when he comes. He'll be coming around the mountain when she comes.